And this is the first of a two-part conversation, really, about AI in education. And we were just laughing. We've got an all-female speaking lineup, and we've got a very female-heavy room. Isn't that interesting? Thinking about this topic and where it is and where it needs to be. And tonight's first of two parts conversation around this is being co-hosted by myself, Hannah from the Belonging Effect, and Yasmin, who you're going to meet from the CVP group. And we've partnered on a few things before, and this is a new partnership to think about what's coming down the line really for the school system. So, going to start with a provocation. What happens when technologies shaping our young people's futures are designed without the perspectives of the communities most impacted by them? Because I think when we think about presence and absence and who's being centered, when I reached out to the women who are you're gonna meet this session and next session, the common conversation was this conversation has been dominated by a certain group of individuals. And they have very shared identities and they're very loud and they're all over socials and they're at every conference. And if we don't disrupt this space now, the space will be gatekept by other people. So that's what excites me. I'm all about disrupting spaces in an intentional way, but also making sure we're centering representation and we're amplifying the voices that need to be amplified. Because otherwise we know that it perpetuates the problems, it doesn't resolve the problems. So tonight, for our first part of the conversation, we're going to be thinking about like who gets to shape the future, really thinking about representation and bias. And then the second part, which is not until September when people have some time to do some thinking and some reading, we're going to think more about from awareness to action and how we build that inclusive approach to this work, but also that ethical oversight of this work as well. And you'll get to meet some different people on the panel who will contribute in those two parts of the conversation. So let's just do some introductions first of all. If you've not met me before, I'm Hannah. I'm the co-founder of the Belonging Effect. We used to be called Diverse Educators. I'm a former head teacher and I've been running my own business for the last 6 years. And I'm really passionate about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging. So that's kind of my introduction. Yasmin, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hi everyone, I'm Yasmin Arif. I'm Director of Education at CVP Group. We are an apprenticeship training provider. I've also, like Hannah, got over 20 years experience working in schools as a teacher in middle and senior leadership roles. And now I'm all about giving back to the schools and trying to add value through the apprenticeship programs we run. So I'm hoping to talk to you a little bit about the AI apprenticeship that we've got coming in November. And I'm really excited to speak with some excellent speakers who I've read all about this week because I've had lots of one-to-ones with many of these amazing women. So I'm really looking forward to this evening.
Brilliant, thank you, Yasmin. I do a thing alphabetical order. So Abena, you're up first. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, so I'm Abner. I have about 20 years experience in education, but I'm now not predominantly education. I'm education adjacent, but also I'm involved in politics as well. I'm a councillor. Only this weekend, I was in The Hague talking about AI and politics and how it's changing politics and making sure that people are informed about that. I do leadership training as well. And I actually train on an AI apprenticeship at the moment and train SMEs. And soon I'll start training some SMEs in Mauritius. Unfortunately, it's going to be remote. That's me.
One of these days, you might be actually on the beach that Steph's pretending to be on, and you can make us all feel very, very jealous. Great to have you here, Abena. Thank you. Betty, you're up next.
Well, hello everyone. I'm Betty Johnson. I'm a former head teacher, currently a school improvement partner, look after about 6 schools within Lewisham. And aside that, I run that through my own business called Renovate Recruitment and Consultancy, where I provide consultancy support on school improvement for schools across London. I am an AI advocate, a real one where I absolutely love to share all the tips and also challenge some of the biases within the workspace. I have a newsletter, weekly newsletter on LinkedIn, which is all about using AI to support teacher workload. Excited to say I was actually commissioned by Routledge, the publisher, to contribute a chapter to teacher workload and using the AI, leveraging on AI. So I'm really excited to be part of this conversation.
Brilliant. Thank you, Betty. You've made me think of something. If the speakers want to put their LinkedIn URLs into the chat so people can follow you, and that would be great. Jennifer asked me earlier in the week, like, what's the hashtag? What's the campaign? I was like, it's a bit early. We're not quite there yet, but we will get there. So Jennifer, do you want to jump in and introduce yourself?
Thank you very much, Hannah. It's a pleasure to be in this space. My name's Jennifer Surajpal. I'm founder of IT Solutionist. I come with 25 years plus of experience in the education sector. My last actual place that I was in was the Brit School, and I'm sure you're all aware of it. It was a wonderful experience looking after all of the IT from the time that you come into the building to the time you leave as well. So it's the CCTV, it's looking at the end user devices. And the most important part of it was looking at AI as well and how that will work through the digital transformation and the digital strategy. Presently, I work with trusts looking at the AI and looking at digital transformation across different sectors, which has worked really well. And what I feel is the heart of it is looking at it from a safeguarding perspective more than anything else. Thank
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, brilliant, Jennifer. Absolutely. I didn't realise we had the Brit School link in common. I've done some work with the Brit Schools, but I didn't realise that's where you were. So maybe we crossed paths in the past through that as well. So they are our speakers for tonight. We've then got Laura, Paulette, and Victoria, who will hopefully be joining us at part two in September. So you'll get that breadth and depth and diversity of thought when it comes to this important topic. So I kind of alluded to this already. Like, what's our why? As at the Belonging Effect, we're a DIB training provider. We consult, we coach. And why are we interested? When Yasmin and Adam first reached out to me, I did say it feels a bit left field. Like, this is not my bag at all. I had to actually use AI to even get the questions for what I was going to ask the panel tonight. Like this is something that I have not veered into. But then Yasmin sent me a few things to read, and then I ended up going to a conference recently where Laura Bates was the headline keynote speaker, and her new book is all about the link between AI and misogyny. And I think suddenly something solidified in my brain that although this isn't what we do primarily, there is such a need to think about the link to DEIB. So then I did go through my LinkedIn sort of like network, and I rang Diana Asagi and said, who else do I need to be approaching? Hence how we've got such a brilliant lineup, because Yasmin and Adam want to make sure they are working with experts, but also people with lived experience to bring that duality of awareness to the work. And one of the reasons why we started working with CVP as a kind of a partnership was that they have been working with our network on the coaching certification over the last couple of years, because coaching is a white female space, and we've now got 40 people trained to coach who are not white straight females, and AI is a white male space. So if we can disrupt those two spaces and the influence they have over society, over the system, over the schooling, that to me is quite exciting. Okay, so that's my kind of why for how it does make sense, but we are not the experts. The experts are who you're going to hear from in a moment. And whenever myself and the team, we've got 15 DIB training associates, well, whenever we're delivering training, we always get people to think about how we're developing on ourselves and others through our consciousness, confidence, and competence. And we can apply those three C's to AI in education and digital strategy as well. What consciousness do people have as teachers, as leaders, as governors when it comes to the potential of AI, but also the risks of AI? Because I think some people can go almost a bit blind into it, and then the safeguarding that Jennifer referenced can become a real problem. I think the confidence or lack of, I read an article recently, it might be what actually Yasmin sent me, about how many women are in the AI space but don't say they're in the AI space. It's not on their LinkedIn profile, it's not on their CV. They're tentatively doing it, but they're not really owning it. And it's probably that whole like CV thing that men see they do 70%, so talk about it. Women see they can't do 30%, so don't talk about it until they've finished article. So I think there's something here around empowerment and agency. And then the competence piece, Betty referenced the fact that AI can reduce workload and can enhance well-being. We know we are in a crisis when it comes to our sector. And actually, how can AI bring solutions, workable solutions, to make us more effective, more efficient, and actually look after people and keep them well and keep them in the system as well? So that to me is the kind of the link and how we can be thinking about this. And you're all coming to the conversation tonight in very different positions, very different perspectives, on very different different parts of your journey. And for me, it's about meeting people where they are and starting that conversation. So here's a couple of things to think about, and put some ideas in the chat. What's one thing that you'd like to see schools to start questioning more critically when it comes to their digital strategy? What's on your radar? What kind of conversations are you part of, or would you like to be part of if they're not happening? So put some thoughts in the chat for question one. And then question two, how can educators influence AI strategy if they're not technical experts? And that's me. I've put my hands up already, not a technical expert. I'd love just to hear some thoughts in the chat for those two questions. Just fire away some ideas, some thoughts, or you might want to return a question with a question if you're in the kind of the curious state. I'm just going to open up the chat box and see what comes up from you before I hand over to our speakers. Jennifer's done her homework, and so has Yasmin. We've got some LinkedIn profiles in the chat. Okay, that's a great question, Jennifer. Who's in charge? Who's responsible for it? Who's monitoring it? Who's gatekeeping it? So if we've got governors in the room, trustees in the room, how involved are they? Do they know what they're even supposed to be checking on? I think that's an interesting question around the accountability piece. So thank you. Let me see if anyone else wants to put. Would like to see more risk management on using digital safety. Yeah, absolutely. I think it was actually Sue Cowley, who many of you will know. She did a bit of a rant last night, as Sue does, on Blue Sky. And she said, like, it seems to be an absolute tension that you've got schools and the government locking down on kids having access to phones, but then the DfE are driving forward AI in education. And how do those two things coexist? So I thought that was quite an interesting tension that she was addressing. I think that's Monia. Training on Copilot, who monitors it, and how is unconscious bias in AI addressed? Yeah, that's we've really been thinking about who's feeding it, who's feeding the algorithms, because is the bias just being further perpetuated? Catherine's comment, I think schools need to make sure they're not buying into the hype. Absolutely. I call it magpie syndrome. And like we've all opened cupboards in schools and found loads of kit that no one's ever actually used. What a waste of money. And not using AI is also an option, true. So being really clear on our intentionality, thinking about the why and the purpose, absolutely. Yasmin's talking about the development of technical expertise. We can upskill quickly. It's the leadership strategy and ethics of AI that needs a bigger thinking. Absolutely agree. Amelia's saying, let's not trip ourselves up by thinking AI is technical, because so much of how we interact with it is very human. Yeah, I like that. The kind of the human intelligence versus the AI intelligence and what we bring to it. Thank you, Amelia. Is the digital strategy part of the school development plan, or is it separate? Yeah, always a good question. What sort of access do we want children to have, and what don't we want them to have? Yeah, really thinking about those boundaries. Where are schools using AI, and how do the audience feel about that? Some really great questions there, and we can obviously download them and put them into Claude, and Claude can write a blog about them for us and find all the answers after tonight's session. So our mantra, the belonging effect, is shaping intention into impact. And I think that really speaks to some of your comments there. There's often a lot of intent, but do we know what the desired impact is? And are we reverse engineering it? Are we clear on what it is we're trying to achieve? With DEIB, we've seen a lot of activity and a lot of noise in the last few years, but a lot of it feels really performative and really surface level. And I do fear that AI could fall into that trap as well. So we're now going to move into a bit of a panel discussion. We've got three speakers tonight, and we've got some questions that Claude has very, very helpfully given me to ask our speakers. They're going to like own each section, but different people can also jump in based on these questions. And this is really about us meeting the experts and hearing from them about the things we should be considering. So we're going to start by thinking about the risks, and Jennifer's going to lead on this section. So Jennifer, what concerns you most about AI in education right now?
So, Hannah, I'm going to go back to, first of all, the trust that I work with,
Mhm.
my clients. And what seems to concern me, and this seems to be a repetitive pattern at this point, is that they've got many different plates that they're spinning. They've got safeguarding, they've got alongside this send review as well. How are they going to actually think about developing AI within the actual trust itself? And that concerns me about AI in education right now. So they're unable to prioritize AI. They think, okay, we want to actually get down with this. We want to make sure that it's embedded. We want to train our staff, but they don't seem to be able to have the time. So it's looking at how this is going to be done. And it ends up being that tech enthusiast that is actually leading AI, and it ends up working. You've got an AI policy that doesn't actually sit alongside the school development plan and the digital strategy, which normally sits separately as well. So it's making sure that this sits together, and it's actually underpinned by the school development plan rather than being in silos. So that really concerns me, and that needs to be the foundation more than anything else in education at this point as well, because you end up with a situation where you've only got certain people just driving it as opposed to everyone being part of it, and it's inclusive.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I guess that feeds into the next question. Like, where do you already see bias or exclusion showing up when it comes to technology and education? Do you want to build on it with that question?
Yes, so within this, you've got the Senkos, you've got those students that need to be able to use AI as well, because it can actually be a very useful tool in terms of being able to develop their progress as well from having this. But when you're looking at different software for AI and you're thinking about, okay, is this going to be useful for this actual learner? If you've got that tech enthusiast actually deciding, okay, we're going to procure this, or you're getting the head teacher or a trust leader going to a conference and saying, this is great for the school, I'm going to buy it. It's not actually being inclusive, and we need to be aware of that. If we're thinking about the AI tools itself, is it actually catering for the different learners that we've got, or is it catering for the average learner that we've got? So it's thinking of that, for me, is really important in terms of it being ethical and also not being biased. And I can
Yeah.
talk all day about being
Well,
biased in
you're
terms of the
making me think about
systems.
like other
Yeah.
domains in education where we've got domination, we've got monopolies, where there's not like someone's basically found a space and owned a space, and it's really hard then to come in and disrupt that. And we're almost unlearning and relearning some of these things, such as recruitment. I'm not going to name any companies, but we know there's been
Yes.
domination in that space for a really long time. So I feel like AI could very quickly go that way, couldn't it? Where we've got companies perhaps owning the market, but are they the best people to be owning the market as well? So what groups risk being left out of the conversation? Like, who's on your radar who perhaps aren't being consulted or aren't being considered at the moment?
So if we're thinking about that working group, does it have that representative in terms of the Senko that you've got there as well? Have you also got the teacher that might not actually be technically competent as well? Are they part of this working group when you're deciding as well, when purchasing this piece of equipment, or it might be not just the equipment, the application as well? Is there a change management process that's been done, or you're just doing it on a knee-jerk reaction? And that also
Yeah.
needs to feed into that whole school development plan and digital strategy that sits underneath, not at the side of it.
I'm thinking about parents and carers as well, Jennifer. Like some of the
Parents
schools
and
we're
carers,
supporting, there's very strong parental views about using or not using tech, and it can really hinder, can't it, actually, a school's strategy. So how we bring the parents and carers on board with this as well, is that another challenge to be considering?
definitely. And I have had that challenge in terms of having those parents as well, thinking about even just rolling out a one-to-one device where you've got access to all of the AI tools as well, how that's going to be affecting them. Are they happy with it? Does it go against their principle? Because I've worked with trusts where you've got the students who are not allowed screens when they go home as well. So
Mm,
how are we going to work that? If we're talking about parents and communities, thinking about the Digital Poverty Alliance and the work that they do, and thinking about the fact that they don't have representation when they go home for AI actual equipment. So, have they actually got equipment that they can use AI on as well? And then we're thinking about equity then. We could talk all day
yeah.
about this,
Oh, I
Hannah.
know we could. I live down in Bath, so I'm in the West Country, and there's a massive coalition of tech leaders down here in a tech for good kind of like movement because it
Yeah.
can go wrong so quickly as well. Thank you, Jennifer. Abner, Betty, do you want to add anything to any of the questions around risk, things we've not addressed, or things you want to add in? Betty and Nordine, do you want to go first?
Right.
Betty,
Okay.
go for it, babe,
Yeah,
go for it.
I mean, talking about that, I think we're going to talk about diversity in AI strategy. But what I wanted to share was, I think I shared an article with you, Hannah, about who is this built for.
Mm,
So this is actually, of course, AI is used and it learns human prompting. So whatever you're using to test the tool is what is going to depict the outputs.
mm.
who has these models been trained on? Is it diverse? Is it probably trained on privileged, middle class, white, children, let's say, if it's within the context of education? And therefore, what would the output be for a very diverse classroom? I'm thinking of a child who is probably a PP child. I really dislike the word disadvantage. I prefer the word underserved by the system.
Yeah.
Peoples. Are they really being reflected in terms of like the testing of the models for the output? What are we actually getting? And in terms of biases as well, I mean, I've done a lot of work around researching some of the outputs from these models. And it's very clear that it depicts even pay gap, salary negotiation. When it is a male, if you use a male name to test out, you get completely different outputs. So is it the same for when it comes to girls and boys in the classroom setting? Is what I want to raise about. There's so many questions.
Yeah, no, thank you, Betty. And that piece around it was there's so much work happening around social mobility, social disadvantage, the digital divide, digital poverty. It does almost feel counterintuitive then, doesn't it, to then be driving AI forward if we haven't got the hardware, the software, the access to actually use it as well. So there's an interesting tension there. Thank you, Betty. Abena, you wanted to jump in. What are you reflecting on?
Okay, so I'm reflecting on the fact that I'm one of those people who is sort of like the tech person that you all keep on talking about, is the person who's making decisions. And what made me laugh was that the fact that things like, for example, racism, there would be somebody, they'll pick somebody who's the most interested, or EDI, who's the most interested, and they'll allow them to do the work, or some other topic. It's always about who's the most interested. But the thing is, especially with this AI, is that it's going to actually impact on all of us. So it shouldn't be that it should be only the people who are the tech people who are going to be the sort of proponents of it, because everybody's going to be affected by the tech people. But one of the points I wanted to make, well, several points I wanted to make, was that I actually have a master's in computer science. I didn't say that. And I actually work in AI. But as you were saying, Hannah, that's not on my LinkedIn. If you look, you'll see my posts talking about I'm doing this AI, doing that AI, but I've got nothing about the fact that I'm training AI apprenticeships. I've got nothing about the fact that I'm training businesses. And it's not because, I'm a woman and I don't want to share it. It's just I'm not great at LinkedIn. But one of the things that I want to talk about was the fact that if you look at the people who own these humongous AI companies, it's not just that it's Western thinking and it's biased because it's Western thinking. But actually, if you look at the geographical location of these companies, two of the main ones are based in San Francisco. So it's not even just limited to the USA, it's limited to a certain part of the USA. And I've already seen on LinkedIn, I've seen on all sorts of different places where there's this homogenization of language and culture. So we have this automation bias as humans that if a computer says something, we believe it. So we see people using Zs in the posts that they do. We see that people are using the same tone, the same way of conveying their ideas. So it's taking out the nuances. It's taking out the localization of the way that people think. It's also taking out people are becoming lazy in the way that they think as well. And in fact, children are becoming lazy. When I come to my part, I will talk about some studies that have been done in regards to children and how they're using AI. But it's not just children, it's adults. And I think one of the things that we need to be very, very careful of is it's supposed to be a tool to support you. It's not supposed to replace thinking. And a lot of the time, the example is interactive whiteboards. At one point, they were the things that were being pushed. And I must say, I can't remember where I saw it, but there are studies to show that there has been absolutely no effect on education and the quality of education based on the interactive whiteboards. It has allowed people to be more efficient. That's great, but it hasn't improved education. And I think that's an issue that we need to think about in relation to AI. Are we going to be more efficient in the way that we do things, but is it actually going to really improve the learning? That's what we want to focus on. We want to improve learning, not just do things faster.
Yeah, great question. And just going to Americanisms, as an English teacher, the M dash, I didn't know what the M dash was until Claude and ChatGPT arrived. And now every person who sends me an email or a blog, like, did you really write that? There's a few M dashes in your LinkedIn post. And that's an interesting indicator as well. So thank you, Abena. Let's move on to section 2 then and dive into the representation kind of piece. So Betty, just clarify for us, why is diversity in AI strategy so important?
Of course, it's hugely important because, of course, if I'm going to take you right back into the Industrial Revolution, right? There wasn't, what was it? I read a research that said it was going to replace motherhood. Mother's touch was going to be replaced. So there were already so many stigma about it. And I feel, or from my experience, it's almost like this is what exactly is happening within the sector of this AI revolution. The Industrial Revolution took over 80 years. Here we are with AI, the pace at which it's moving is moving faster. We're not talking of decades, we're talking of just years. Probably will look completely different within the next 2 or 3 years to come. But here is the case. Who are the people making the decision here? And who are they making those decisions for? Is it well represented? Do we have the diversity around there? Do you know what? Representation is just being invited to the table. But inclusion or diversity is actually saying being part of the decision making. Do we have enough women being represented on there? Do we have enough people of color being represented in this sector? Why is it important? Because, of course, time to come, this is going to be our way of life. We cannot deny it. And we need everybody's voice represented so it doesn't create even more biases within this sector. And I'm going to share research. There's a research by Baker and Hon, which was published in International Journal of Artificial Intelligence. I mean, they found out that, of course, the biases within the educational AI emerges not just from data. They're talking about the design decisions. And who are those people making these decisions for us? That is going to change possibly the way we work within the next few years. Is it going to widen the gap for people who are less privileged or protected characteristics? Really here. So having that voice, I think, Hannah, I couldn't agree with you more. We need women stepping out. We need people of color going, yes, we want to learn. And I always say you don't have to be the expert. I have built 4 AI apps. I don't have, unlike Abena, I don't have computing background, right? I'm a typical primary school teacher. My first degree is in economics, actually. So like no correlation there at all. But if I can actually build 4 apps with no knowledge, there isn't an excuse here. These tools are there for us to use, and the learning has become like the knowledge is so accessible now. Let's embrace it so that we have representation within not just the classroom, because it might be too late by the time it gets to the classroom, but actually at the design stage.
Yeah, I love that, Betty. And I think you've answered a question too about like who's often missing. You've mentioned women missing, people of colour missing. I mentioned parents. Jennifer mentioned sort of SEND. If we move on to the third question, like a bit, this is I think the bit that really interests me about like the parallels between AI and DEIB. How do we move beyond it being tokenistic and performative and surface level, and to be like truly inclusive? What are your thoughts about the kind of the approach we need to take?
I think it's got to be a very strategic approach by senior leaders. It's as equally important as having the curriculum. I mean, we had about 5 years or 10 years ago, everybody going, oh, we need to look at our curriculum. Is our curriculum diverse enough? There was all of a sudden a light bulb moment where schools, everyone jumped on it. it's not a case of go and use ChatGPT here and there. Schools must be very intentional about the approach. Who are they developing? Is it part of their school improvement overview? Is that a focus? This would then not just make a case of, oh, we've got like a policy in place, as DFE is now requiring that schools have a policy in place. It doesn't just become a policy that sits somewhere on their website that nobody looks at.
Yeah, absolutely, Betty. I'm just keeping an eye on my time. We could have done 2 hours, I think, for this webinar about all these different topics. I'm going to move us on to section 3 so we can hear from Abhinav, which is really, I guess, thinking about the future of Abhinav, like the hope, the possibility, the opportunities. What brings you joy and excitement about this?
Yeah, I think what the reason why I chose this section is because I talk a lot about the doom and gloom.
Yeah.
But there are positives that can happen. So just in the same way, and I want to go back to what Betty said about the fact that she does not know how to code, but she was able to develop those apps. It sort of democratizes certain areas that were not available to other people and allows people to have power. So when I was at my sort of conference this weekend, we were talking about some politicians across Europe who wanted to create some apps to be able to support people in their area, people in their country. And because of vibe coding, they were able to create those apps. They wouldn't have been able to do that before that point because they would need the actual technical knowledge. So instead of you having to have that technical knowledge, it's about the knowledge that you have, the expertise that you have in your own particular role, and you can still actually create something of value. So I really, really like that. I also like the opportunity to be able to sort of, because I'm sorry to say, there's a lot of education which is sort of like a factory model, do this, and then send them out into the world. And what's really wonderful about AI is that we can get to the point where we can sort of hyper individualize things. So we can actually create lessons which are appropriate for the person's vocabulary level. They can work at their own pace. It can be appropriate for their level of cognition or the way that they think as well. And that is going to be an amazing thing. And I really like the fact that we've used that word responsible, because if we're responsible, the amazing thing that we can do is that we can take away all of those admin tasks through using AI that teachers have to follow, which means that they can focus more on the learning, which I think is the majority of the reason why people have chosen teaching. So it can reduce the workload in regards to that, so that we can focus on the human element. Because as I used to say to my students, my job is not just to teach you computer science, it's to teach you how to be a good citizen, it's to show you how to interact with other human beings. And that's why it's really, really important that we don't take that human out of the loop, because although it's wonderful that we can do that individualization and such like, actually interacting with another human being is so important and is an integral part of education.
Yeah, I completely agree. And you've touched on the second question already around what an inclusive classroom or curriculum delivery could look like from a personalisation point of view. What about the wider kind of school? How might this really help? Like, if schools married up their kind of their DIB strategy with their digital strategy, like what might the inclusive practice look like? What could we be changing in how we operate as schools?
Okay, so earlier I was talking about the homogenization of culture and linguistics. And if we're talking about the DIB section of this, the dominant sort of paradigm that we use in education is Western text-based. Maybe when we look at AI as well, we use image-based as well. And the default that we use as well is the Western way of thinking. And we, a while back, we were talking about decolonizing education. It can help to decolonize. So in India, for example, they've got this model that they use, and I'm probably going to butcher it and say it incorrectly. I'm just trying to find my notes. It's called Bashini. And what they're doing is that they are localizing AI, and they have AI which will actually translate things into regional accents and regional dialects, so that students who may not be able to access it if they're using maybe the main dominant dialect will be able to actually access things in their native tongue. And so it's doing away with that sort of homogenization that I was talking about. And so the thing that we have to remember is that in just the same way that AI can cause problems, it can be used to
Yeah.
sort of balance out the issues that it creates.
I love that. And we've got increasing multilingual learners, haven't we, and staff members in our schools, parents and carers. So actually
Mm.
seeing it as a solution to build connectivity and understanding there, that's a great way of thinking about it. So final question for you, Abner, like what role would you like to see educators playing in this tech digital revolution moving forward?
So again, I'll go back to people thinking, well, I'm not the expert in regards to AI. I'm not the expert in regards to tech, but you are the expert in regards to pedagogy. You're the expert in regards to your subject. And aligning, co-creating together with the people who are the tech experts and the education experts. And in regards to design, as I said, I'm a computer scientist. The systems that fail are the systems who it's just a tech person sort of designing it in a silo and not
Mm.
thinking about the end users. The end users are everybody. Everybody is the end user. So everybody has to be involved. The whole point of creating this is to make it usable. So therefore, don't think that you're powerless in this process, because if it's not usable for you, then it's defunct. It has no purpose. So I think it's really important for people to realize that you have the power to say, I want to be involved in a working group. So even within your school, I want to be involved in a working group. I may not be tech savvy, but I'm education savvy, and I have a right to be able to say how I want this to be done. That you do have the power to be able to do that. There were a few more things I want to do, but I'm trying to decipher my notes.
No, I
And
love
I
that.
can't
We
decide
will
all at the
we'll
moment.
come back to I want Yasmin to share about the opportunity, then we'll do a bit more of a Q&A with the audience. And I think just wrapping up what the three of you were saying here, like the conversation can't belong to a small group of experts and a small group of experts who hold a particular lens and identity. The future of AI in education has to be collective, it has to be shared, it has to be democratized, it has to be diverse. So maybe whilst I'm getting over to Yasmin to share her piece in the chat, like what's one thing that the people who are here tonight would hope that education might do differently as AI evolves? Like what excites you, the people who are here listening, about the potential and the possibility with AI? When I pull it all together, send that to you later in this week. I'm going to send you the page on our website that is a kind of a landing page at the moment around the collaboration that CVP and the Belonging Effect are developing when it comes to DEIB and AI in education, because we're going to be adding more and more information here. But I want to hand over to Yasmin to really share the exciting opportunity that is here for hopefully the people on the call and your networks to find out more about. So Yasmin, over to you.
Thanks, Hannah. Just a heads up, my internet connection's being quite unstable because I had to change location. So if it does go, you need to be my wing woman, Hannah, and take her
Fill
and
in for
take her,
you.
yeah, and fill in while I sort it out. But all so far, um, so basically, everyone's frozen, but if you can give me a thumbs up if you can still hear me. Yeah, oh, that's great. Okay. So it's just the visuals from my end. So yeah, I think the voices that have you've heard today have summed up everything. I think the issues that we face as educators still exist, even though AI is here, and they'll just manifest in a different form. Um, and we need to mitigate that and even sort of stop it to some extent by having different voices. And we've seen how impactful it is doing that through the apprenticeship, because it's a democratic way of educating our workforce, and it's a government funded scheme. So, we're using the taxpayers' money, and then we're adding value, and we're able to do that to the groups that matter. And with the coaching, it's been so impactful, as Hannah said, because we're able to diversify the coaches available to the education community because of that, what we've done with that funding. Unfortunately, the government made a decision to defund all leadership and management apprenticeships a couple of months ago, which means that the coaching is coming to an end now, and we will no longer have funding for that. And that runs out at the end of this year. But when one door closes, another one opens. And that's why we've decided to pivot to AI, because I only want to run apprenticeships where I see there's going to be a real impact. And I think coaching is still 100% in my heart, but I think AI is going to be equally as important to us as educators and as an apprenticeship training provider. So I'm so excited to launch the first cohort in November this year. It's going to be a 12-month program, and it will be a workplace qualification, which that means it's not just theory. If you're not familiar with apprenticeships, it's work-based application. So you do a masterclass, you do an action lab, and then you go away and implement what you've learned, so that there's a real, it's a bit like a PGCE. That was the first part of learning that I ever did, where I did my degree, my English literature degree, and I was like, okay, not quite sure how this is going to pan out in the real world. Did my teaching qualification. I was like, oh, this is hands-on practical. And that's what an apprenticeship is. It's hands-on practical experience. And as you can see, Hannah's just shared that slide. That's a loose overview of the curricula. But I said, come in, we teach you the foundations, we look at some problems, then we build in some technical expertise and some solutions, and then you do a work-based project to show how you've done that with some ROI, return on investment, and to show the impact you've had. In a nutshell, we've got a wonderful design team in the pipeline, and some of the trainers are on this call at the moment. All from diverse backgrounds, all women so far, which is not a bad thing, because it seems to be dominated by male voices at the moment, the AI space. And they will add even more richness and expertise to this curriculum. So I can really promise you now, by November, whoever is enrolled on this first cohort, you're going to get the best experience. You're going to have a really well-designed curriculum with a plethora of expertise, but you're also going to have excellent energy and motivation, because we're all so up for this. So really, that's just me sharing the next opportunity. And it doesn't have to be just for leaders. I think it's more important that, we get frontline teaching staff on this, frontline, if you're on front facing and you're not in a leadership role, that's okay. We don't just want the loud voices and the people who are keen. We want to be hunting out those people in our schools and education establishments who've got potential, maybe the quiet ones who could do this, who represent a unique voice that isn't represented. So the details are, Hannah, how do you want us to share the sign up? Do you want to share your expression?
Yeah, we'll do the email out with everyone,
Yeah.
and they can submit their details, and then you can do the follow up. And I'm just thinking about support staff, Yasmin, as well, and all the schools and trusts I've
Yeah,
worked
absolutely.
in. The support
Yeah.
staffs often get forgotten about when it comes to PD. And actually, this is an apprenticeship levy that could really upskill and add value to our operational staff. And they're the ones who are constantly duplicating work anyway. So I'm quite excited about this being like cross-sector, but also like not just for the teachers. Actually, all staff in education could really benefit from this as well. So I will do a follow-up email to everyone. And in that follow-up email, what we are building is also some thought leadership around this. When Yasmin and I first talked about it, we had 2 blogs out of 700 about AI. We've now got 2 more. I've got 2 more in my inbox. So this is an area of interest for the people on the call. I would love you to write a blog about it and send it to me, and we will publish that, because like the thought leadership at the moment is dominated by a certain identity group and a few big names. And I see the same people at all the conferences. So please do get in touch. The blog we put out this morning via the website, the newsletter, and LinkedIn was the one by Paulette Watson, who's going to be speaking at part 2 of this series. And similarly, like, not I'm going to try and get you all to buy loads of books and just read all summer, but thinking about how you're developing your own knowledge between part 1 and part 2. We've left a gap on purpose. We're going to resume this conversation in September. Here's a couple of books to get thinking about. I mentioned that I met Laura Bates recently and heard a cracking keynote from her about how AI is driving misogyny and how the two ideas need to come together. Laura's going to join us next time. She's written a book in the series that a number of us have contributed to. It's really practical about generative AI in the classroom. Anne's not got capacity to be involved in this, but Anne is all over LinkedIn and all over the anti-racism kind of agenda. And she's doing a lot of work globally about AI at the moment. So her book's there. And then Paulette's also published a book about women disrupting the AI space. So again, like let me know if there's blogs, if there's books you want me to add to the kind of the portfolio. We're beginning to create a bit of a kind of an area of thought leadership and things to think about, read, and find out about to develop ourselves and to also develop others as well. So I'm conscious we have run over, but I am going to stay on and see if there's questions that people want to ask from the room. I haven't had a chance to keep an eye on the chat. Let's take 3 questions from the room. Would anyone like to unmute and ask a question to one of our lovely speakers or to the panel, and they can choose who wants to answer it? What have we not covered, or what are you curious about, or what would you like further clarity on? Would anyone like to ask a question? Go for it, Katie. Hello, how are you?
Hi, yeah, no, I'm great. Apologies that I was a little bit late. It's been absolutely amazing to listen, to these people that are ahead of the game for somebody like myself as well. I'm a skills coach in CVP of almost 2 years and champion the coaching, organizational coaching apprenticeship, and love working with the educators because I just see the value of that going into schools. You mentioned there about, engaging the senior leadership team. I know from, obviously my coaching journey of 26 years, sometimes that isn't always possible to start at the top. And it's great that people have been going in at, mid-level of leadership. How do we encourage more people to get involved?
Good question. Who wants to start?
Should I take that? Because so schools that I've worked with, the approach has been they have actually planned it as part of their CPD, so staff meetings, and it has been in a case of let's just be curious. What can the tools do? I do a number of training for schools, and most of the time we start with things like just even generating images, and that get people so excited, and then they want to even find out a bit more. Because majority of the time it is in our minds that, oh gosh, it's coding, it's computing, and straight away people give up before they can even give it a go. Mm-hmm. So how we are approaching it in my setup or in the schools that I work with is we start with all the fun things. We make our plushie. And by the time everyone can make a plushie, they go, oh, is it that easy? Then you can take it forward. So start with the exciting part.
I love that. Make it fun, make it accessible. I'm conscious we've run over, Abner. So if you need to dip out, absolutely. I'm sorry we've run over a little bit. Please do dip out. And thank you very much for everyone who's joined us tonight and also who's contributed. Jennifer, jump in. What were you going to add to this question from Katie?
Katie, I was also going to add that it needs to be a priority on the school improvement plan. And when it becomes that priority and it's on that school improvement plan, then they start taking it seriously as well. And it needs to come from leadership more than anything else. So.
Yeah, I completely agree. Abner, do you want to add anything before you dip out? Anything you've not said that you wanted to say tonight?
Well, I did, but it will be too much of a rush. It was lovely to meet all of you. I've put my LinkedIn details on there. I always like to collaborate and speak to new people. So if you want to follow me, that's absolutely fine. I'm sure I will see all of you very, very soon.
Thank you, Abena. Lovely to see you. Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a great question there from Katie. Let's see if there's one more question in the room. Does anyone else want to ask any more questions of the panel before we let you all go? Because if not, we can wrap up and we can put a pin in it for now. I'm glad it's been informative. We've probably got a lot to mull over and to process and to go and get curious about in our own settings. And I would love to see you back for part 2 after the summer break. So I'll follow up this week with all those bits I talked about. And there'll be more information coming out from Yasmin and the team as well as this very exciting curriculum and opportunity evolves and begins to take shape. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us. Thank you to the experts, the speakers, and everyone who's joined us tonight. But please do go and get off the Zoom, put the kettle on, go home, whatever it is you need to do on a Wednesday afternoon. But thank you very much for your time tonight.